Watching News at Prime, let's get into this conversation now. Convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein's wealth and influence marked decades of predatory behavior. Public records identify his first known victim back in 1994, a child of just 13 years. With his accomplice, Ghislaine Maxwell, he groomed underage girls and young women with the promise of education, modeling, or opportunities, only to subject them to sex trafficking. Well, one of those survivors is Juliette Bryant. She joins us now as she tries to put her life back together 15 years after the allegedly facing abuse at the hands of Epstein. And she talks to us from Cape Town tonight. Juliette, good evening to you. Thank you very much for your time. I'd like to start with how you met Jeffrey Epstein, his now late, together with his partner, Ghislaine Maxwell, now a convicted criminal as well.
Sorry. I met Epstein when he was in Cape Town. A girl approached me at Osaka on Kloof Street and told me that her friend was here. He was the King of America. She said he was here with Bill Clinton and Kevin Spacey, and his best friend, Leslie Wexner, owned Victoria's Secret. I was studying psychology and philosophy at the University of Cape Town, but I was doing modeling on the side to earn income. So it obviously seemed like an amazing opportunity. So we went across to Beluga, which was very nearby, and sure enough, they were all there having dinner. They all stood up while having dinner. They were with some government officials, and they all shook my hand, and we were there for about 5 minutes. And then we left, and then the girl phoned, and she said that Epstein would like to see my modeling portfolio the next day. Yeah. They were staying at the Cape Grace Hotel.
Yeah, please continue.
So they also invited me to go watch Clinton's speech. He was doing a speech at the Western Cape Peninsula Technicon. So obviously I thought they were good people, and I really believed in what, the cause. I thought they were, trying to help people in Africa. So I went to watch the speech. He didn't really say much, but while he was doing the speech, Kevin Spacey filmed all the students in the hall on a handheld device. This was in 2002, so it was quite unusual for someone to have a small camera that could film things like that.
Yeah.
And all these years later, it's very disturbing, wondering why he was filming everyone in the hall. At the time, I thought it was for the speech and, for the work they were doing. Anyway, after that, we went back to the hotel, and I went in with my modeling portfolio, and there were 3 women posing as modeling agents. I didn't realize at the time they were posing. I believed the whole situation. They said they worked for Karen Models. They looked through my modeling book, and Bill Clinton walked through the room while the casting was taking place. I was then told to go see Epstein with my book, and he looked through my book, and he said, right, he thinks I'd be great for Victoria's Secret. And I didn't have any money at the time or anything, so I told them, it's difficult for me, but they said they're going to pay for my flight, they're going to arrange my passport and my visa, and they will deduct any expenses from my income when I'm there.
Yeah.
So basically, they had me there within like 3 weeks. I landed and was taken to the apartment, and then the phone rang, and they said, pack a small bag, we're going to the Caribbean. I assumed it was for a modeling shoot. I didn't have a phone. It was very different times in 2002. You couldn't get your phone to roam overseas very easily. I didn't have any money, so obviously I just had to go. And then what happened, as soon as the plane took off, he started, being abusive, and I started to realize that I was in great danger.
My goodness.
I thought, oh my God, my family's never going to see me again. I got a terrible fright, because it was my first time traveling out of South Africa. I'd never traveled anywhere on my own. I'd never been anywhere without my family.
Yeah.
I was 20. I was a naive 20-year-old. Yeah, it was very frightening.
All of this, sorry to interrupt, all of this is happening so quickly, and that in a blink of an eye, you are overseas and you are now in his island. But something in you tells you that this is all terribly wrong, and you now feel as though you are kidnapped. Talk to us about that period where you almost feeling that if you do anything wrong, these people are so powerful that your family back in South Africa could be in danger. What happened?
Yeah, exactly. So, I realized that I just had to go along with what he wanted because, I was being called to his room and then, more girls kept coming and going. And then Maxwell arrived as well. She was also there a lot of the time. And eventually they ended up taking me to all the properties over time, But what happened is when I was sent back from there, he told me that he had my family's name on a list and he worked for the CIA. And he told me that a girl who accused him of rape, he planted drugs in her apartment and had her sent to prison. So I was just petrified, I just realized it wasn't a good idea to get on this man's bad side. And I could see that he pretty much ran the world. Like he'd be on the phone to Clinton and Bush. He was friends with Fidel Castro. He had photos with him. He had photos of himself with the Pope. For a young person, it was just a very, very frightening situation to be thrown into.
This is all frightening. And let's then talk about why it is that you have decided to speak out, because for a while you were warned by some people. If you're comfortable to tell us who those people are, you were warned not to speak out. But tell us what it is that's given you the courage to speak out and why it is that you want people to know about your story.
I actually, the whole thing was so traumatic for me, but then after I was given settlement money, I had time to see therapists and to get well and to sort of detangle the hold he had over me. A lot of things have happened since then, and this has been, just very, very frightening. I actually started speaking out on X about 4 or 5 years ago when it was still Twitter. But they kept blocking my accounts. And, the thing is that the mainstream media hasn't actually chosen to interview me. Sorry, my dogs are being naughty in the background. I've got dogs to keep safe. Sorry, dogs. So I started speaking out a couple of years ago on Twitter, which became X, and the mainstream media hasn't yet interviewed me until.
No,
I'm so
totally
sorry.
understand.
I've got protection dogs for a good reason.
Yeah. No, we understand. No worries. Please go on.
So, the mainstream media wouldn't actually interview me until recently, and even when they did, like the BBC didn't interview a couple of years ago. Guys, come on. And they blocked out Clinton's name. They blocked out like a lot of names that I mentioned. So basically, I've been speaking out for years, but it's only recently that the media has actually taken attention to the story because, and that's why I started speaking out, because I realized a lot of the victims might no longer be here. A lot of the victims are unfortunately dead or too traumatized to speak.
Yeah.
So I started speaking out for those who have no voice. And it's taken the media quite a while to put the story on air. But, also there's a lot of dark stuff in the files, which I've been, from the research I did when I had time to work out what they'd actually done to me.
Yeah.
I did a lot of research and I started sharing information, but a lot of people thought I was crazy or whatever. But now that the files have come out, people are realizing that what I said was not untrue. And I think that's why the media has to wait until there's evidence to back up things. So
Yeah.
I have actually been speaking out for a long time. And just thank you also for having me on, because the more light we shed on this, the better. And, coming from a place like Africa, it touches my heart very, very much. It hurts me very badly of all the children and people who are hurt here. And, I'm very proud to be an African. And with trafficking, we know a lot of it happens in our country, on our continent.
Yeah.
And I just want to speak out for all victims of abuse.
Let's talk about what you make reference to, and that is that there are emails that are now being released. All of this is happening in America, but it's having a ripple effect affecting governments such as in the UK. The special advisor or chief of staff to the UK Prime Minister was forced to resign recently, all because he advised the Prime Minister to make Peter Mandelson the UK's ambassador to the United States. So I'm just painting a picture of the ripple effects here. You are a South African. What would you like to see happen, and what would your warning be to people who are unsuspecting? Yes, Jeffrey Epstein is dead now, but there could be many Jeffrey Epsteins out there. What would your warning be to young women who are lured in the exact same way that you were many, many years ago with a modeling contract?
No, of course. You know, that's why I speak out, is because I want to protect young people. It's, you know, the thing is, it's even hard to give advice because, like, it seemed like they were so legitimate, you know, the way that Clinton was the president of America and everything. But what I would suggest people to do in the future is to get a contract. You know, I was young and I didn't realize that I should have had some sort of contract written up that, yes, they're going to be providing modeling, because when you've got something in writing, it can really help someone. You know, I think a lot of people are taken advantage of, where they sort of like, oh, my dreams are coming true, and they go along with it. The thing is to get something in writing, and also to make sure that you've actually got money and a phone to get away if you need to. You know, back in the day, in 2002, it was very different. And also, you know, for anyone who's been abused or be in a bad situation, I would just say get a good network of people around you. Speak to law enforcement if you can. Get away slowly. You know, a lot of these predators are very evil, and they have ways of manipulating people and almost hypnotizing them. And I suppose the main thing is, as any victim of anything like this, to get a lot of rest and just build up your strength so that you're strong enough to take them on. And you know, it's just it's horrific what happens to a lot of people, and it's also terrible how people don't have much voice, you know, when things like this happen.
Yeah.
And I just, yeah, I think the more of them that are exposed, the better.
Juliette Bryant, I'd like to thank you for sharing your story with us. Thank you indeed for opening up, and hopefully there's going to be lots more conversations about this, especially with the files that are being released in their thousands, if not millions. Juliette Bryant is a survivor, and she was just 20 years old when she was lured to the United States by the late sex offender Jeffrey Epstein. And of course, the allegations that we spoke about in the latter part of our conversation, that of course, if you've been mentioned here, you're welcome to come and talk to us. If you feel that your name has been mentioned unfairly, it's an open platform. We'll love to hear your side of the story.